Hi, welcome to Plumline. My name is Bernie Lutchman, and I thank you for joining me today that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. We've come to the end of our series on the Ten Commandments, which was a wonderful journey through God's law. And wow, today we look at commandment number 10, you shall not covet. And there's a whole list of things there, but before we get to that, let's start off what we usually do with a little trivia snippets. Some of them amusing, and hopefully all of them true. I got them off the internet. Some of these things, so they have to be true, right? There are some people in this train. Here are some names you shouldn't covet. Some people with some strange names here, and these are actual names. You are a pig. It's a person's name from Portland, Oregon. There's a lady from Houston, Texas. Her name is I'm a hog. Another one from Chicago, Illinois. I'm a June bug. Actual names. Bug, B-U-G-G, bug. And then there's another lady from Charlotte, North Carolina. Her name is You're a fish. And actually, in the same town, Charlotte, North Carolina, there's another lady named I'm a fish. Not to be outdone over in England, in Welwyn, England, there's a gentleman named Serious Misconduct. In Pueblo, Colorado, there's a gentleman named General Error. Now, that's not the thing you see on the computer when you hit the wrong key. Fans of the Alabama Crimson Tide, this guy obviously is one. His name is Honor Roll from Birmingham, Alabama. There's a gentleman from Tulsa, Oklahoma. His name is Dr. Safety First. And this is an actual name of a guy from San Francisco, E. Pluribus Eubanks. Did you know, like fingerprints, everyone's tongue print is different? Did you know that Babe Ruth, the great New York Yankee first baseman, Babe Ruth wore a cabbage leaf under his cap to keep him cool. He changed it every 2 innings. And he made a lot of cabbage, too, from his baseball days, which he all blew, which he wasted on wine, women, and song. Did you know that fortune cookies were actually invented in America in 1918 by a man named Charles Young, J-U-N-G. Did you know there's a man named Charles Osborne? This is from the Guinness World Book of Records. A man named Charles Osborne has had the hiccups for 69 years. Did you know that a giraffe can clean its ears with its 21-inch tongue? Did you know that while chewing gum, you can peel onions and don't cry? I don't want to try that. I didn't want to peel onions. It tastes good, though, on hamburgers and stuff. Did you know that a praying mantis is the only insect that can turn its head? And did you know, and why we should not try to be like the Japanese, they sell toupees for dogs. Toupees for dogs. Did you know? So, the last of the 10 Commandments, the Decalogue, you shall not covet. Because it's a kind of a long commandment involving a lot of things here, let's take a look at it. It's not the simple one statement one like you shall not steal, you shall not murder and stuff. This one is Exodus 20, verse 17. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male servant, or his female servant, or his ox, or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. And if it's 2012 or 2013, it will read, you shall not covet your neighbor's big job, his car and his boat. You shall not covet his wife or his daughters or his job or his business or stuff like that. So the things change. The concept and the principles have not. Entire world system have been created and still run in these modern times based on violations of these commandments. What do you think socialism and communism is? Coveting things from people, taking it by force, and then oppressing others to follow your will. That's what's going on here. Remember, the first coveting was done by Lucifer, Satan, when he fell from heaven and coveted God's throne. Since then, it's all been downhill and heading towards the time when Jesus will come back and do away with all his enemies, restore the earth, and sit down for 1,000 years on the throne in Jerusalem. But before that, we have to look at covetousness. And to get us going in a direction here, I want to look at a story from the Bible to show that even God's people can slip up and cause irreparable harm to themselves and to those who are not believers. So, this one concerns a man named Gehazi, Gehazi, and he was one of the young prophets who followed the great Elisha. Elisha was what should you say, with the heir apparent, the heir of Elijah, the great Elijah who was taken up to heaven in the chariots of fire. And God endowed Elisha with a lot of powers, you know, the axe head rising up to the water and the cloak hitting the water and the water parted. Elisha had a great servant named Gehazi until now. So we pick it up here in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 20 to 27. Now, before we get to this part here, I want to tell you what happened. There was a man named Naaman who was the captain of the army of the king of Aram. Aram is Syria. He had a serious illness, and his servant girl, who was a Jew, told him of this great prophet down in Israel called Elisha, and how all the miracles that, you know, this man was, and how this man was a real man of God, and whatever he says sometimes comes true because he was a prophet. So the king, Naaman got permission from the king to go down to visit this great Jewish prophet who was a man of God. And remember the story that Elisha told Naaman to go and dip in the river Jordan 7 times and he will be healed. So he did that. He was healed. And because he was healed and he felt so great, he wanted to offer Elisha all kinds of wealth, and because he came down with a pack mule full of gold and silver and all kinds of good stuff. So he asked Elisha, "What can I give you?" After he realized that there is no other God in heaven but the God of Elisha. Elisha, an honorable man, a man of God, a humble man, said, "As the Lord lives and before whom I stand, I will take nothing." And even though Naaman kept insisting for him to take some gold or some silver or some riches as a thank you, as a gift, Elisha said, "No, that's not why I did it." So finally, Naaman realized that he wasn't going to convince the great prophet Elisha to take the gifts. He was heading back home, but his servant Gehazi, Elisha's servant Gehazi, was watching this whole thing. And he saw and he coveted this man's wealth sitting on a mule there that he was taking back to Syria, Aram, because Elisha, his boss, did not want it. So we pick up the story here in verse 20. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, thought. Now here, listen to that right there. He didn't say Gehazi was a man of God, even though he was, he worked for Elisha. So we assume that he was a follower of the Lord. "Behold, my master has spared this Naaman the Aramean." So already he's looking down on this rich captain of the Syrian army, "by not receiving from his hands what he had brought." In other words, what's wrong with you? Why? He offered you a bunch of wealth and gold and whatever you wanted, and you said no. So here's what he's thinking. As the Lord lives, now why is it when these people are about to lie or sin, they always say, as the Lord lives? I will run after him and take something from him. Now remember, Gehazi was not offered it. Now he probably thought because Elisha was offered the money and the gifts and the wealth and the precious metals by Naaman, that he was entitled to it. And because Elisha turned it down, that didn't mean that he turned it down. So he said, I'm going to run after him and take something from him, coveting. He said, all is well, my master. So he went after him. So Gehazi pursued Naaman. When Naaman saw one running after him, he came down from his chariot to meet him and said, is all well? Gehazi said, all is well, my master has sent me. He lied. So he's coveting, he's prideful, and now he's lying. My master has sent me, he says, behold, just now 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Now he's basing this lie on ministry. Sons of the prophets have come to me from the hill country of Ephraim. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothes. Naaman said, I'll be pleased, go right ahead, take 2 talents. And he urged him, oh, sure, man. Oh, finally, he's probably feeling good. Well, finally, they won't accept a gift from me. So he urged him and bound 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothes and gave them to 2 of his servants. And they carried them before him. So he had so much, 2 talents are pretty heavy. So he had to have these 2 guys helping him take it back to, Israel. When they came to the hill, he took them from the hands of the servants and deposited them in his house. So he had the servants take it straight to his house, and he sent the men away, and they departed. Then he went in to his master's house, to Elisha's house, and stood before his master. And Elijah said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, your servant went nowhere. Another lie. Then he said to him, did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? That means the Lord had sent Elisha in spirit along with Gehazi. Did not my heart go with you? Another translation, I think the New Living Translation says, did not my spirit go with you? Is it a time to receive money and to receive clothes and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and females? Everything, some of the stuff he's repeating here from the commandment in Exodus 20. Is it a time to receive money and to receive clothes and olive groves and vineyards and sheep and oxen and male and female servants? Therefore, the leprosy of Naaman, now Naaman had his leprosy healed by dipping in the Jordan 7 times. The leprosy of Naaman will cling to you and your descendants forever. So he went out from his presence, a leper as white as snow. He did not have to do this. He coveted the man's wealth. The gift from Naaman that was offered to Elisha, which Elisha turned down. He lied. He deceived. He bore false witness. There's about a whole bunch of commandments here. He dishonored God because here he is working for the prophet of God and lying to Naaman, saying 2 prophets are coming and we need all this money and clothes. That's not how the Lord operates. So, what do we learn from this story here? Covetousness, whether it's... Now, before we get to the lesson here, let's think about it for a second. There's nothing wrong with looking at your neighbor who you think is better than you, and we don't know what problems he's having and what he did and how hard he worked to afford that boat, that brand new pickup truck, whose wife has probably better clothes than your wife, who's got a lawn care maybe service taking care of his landscaping and that kind of thing. There's one thing to look at a person like that and admiring it and say, man, you got some great stuff here, good for you. There's nothing wrong with that. You're recognizing him and you're complimenting him without thinking in your heart, wow, I should be the one getting that. That's what Gehazi did. He looked at Naaman's wealth, all the gold and silver on those pack mules, going back to Syria, and said, you know, Elisha's a dummy. I should be the one getting that. In fact, I'm going to come back and get it, which he did. And look what it cost him. We don't know what people have gone through to get those things, whether they got it legally or illegally or by walking over people. The thing is, God has given us all that we want, all that he wants us to have in his word, in our own lives and in our own estate in life. The job we have, he gave it to us. The home we live in, he gave it to us. The wife we're married to, or the husband we're married to, or the kids we have, he gave those for us for a reason. And we have a personal responsibility and a value system and a job to do those correctly according to his will, rather than running off and looking at the guy across the street or down the street or sitting there across from you in church driving 5 BMWs and longing to be like him. We don't want to be like that. We want to be like Jesus. We want to be like Elisha, a man of honor, a man of God. So covetousness is at the center of is at the center of all misery of a lot of people. And that's a lesson we should take here. Look at the misery he caused himself. Leprosy, to him and his family forever. Everything that went from Naaman, he not only got the silver and the clothes and all that good stuff from Naaman, he also got his bad stuff, the leprosy that he had dropped by going to the river Jordan. And this could happen to any one of us if we follow this kind of stupidity that Gehazi showed here by coveting somebody else's stuff. We need to stop that right now. And it's a sin that touches every one of us. And America is just going down that road there. You know, this is the land of he who dies with the most toys wins. You hear people say that all the time. He who dies with the most toys win. Win what? You can't take it with you. You know the saying, you never see the U-Haul falling a hearse. But the thing is, people are so into their toys and electronics and their boats and this and that and the latest this and the iPhone 5 and you can go on and on. And now, as we talked in a previous program, where you have people who are stealing from government and stealing from their fellow man by going on disability when they're not sick, insurance fraud, people are expecting others to take care of them while they themselves are capable of doing that kind of thing. And all of this comes from a system that comes from dependency, where the devil is like, you bow down to me and I'll give you all the kingdoms of this world. Jesus rejected all that. Man didn't. Man has developed systems, godless systems like socialism and some other things, and some of them even have Christian faces on them, and deceiving others into that. You can have all this stuff, it won't cost you anything, and everything will be fine with you. Well, we're finding out in Europe going bankrupt and riots in the streets, and what we're going to find out here in the United States one day, that all this free lunch is going to come with a price, and you dance with the devil, you got hell to pay. So this is what we find out when covetousness goes to its logical conclusion, becomes class warfare, and becomes greed and things that are ungodly and which God did not ordain. So we see the end. We see from the story here that man, in his greed, is going to come to a miserable end as Gehazi did, not just for himself but his family. The root of covetousness, as we know, is money, power, possessions, and all that kind of thing. People look for temporary joy in all these things. You know, two passages should serve as a warning to us from the New Testament. Luke chapter 12, verse 15 says, beware and be on your guard. Jesus is saying, beware. This is Jesus. Beware and be on your guard against all forms of greed. And that includes coveting. For not even when one has an abundance does life consist of all its possessions. He who dies with the most toys wins. What a lousy philosophy of life. Romans chapter 7, verses 7 and 8 says, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? 10 Commandments? May it never be. On the contrary, I would not have come to know sin except through the law. Is it through the 10 Commandments that we know what sin is? I would not have known about coveting if the law had not said, you shall not covet. Now, this is a pretty important commandment for both Jesus and Paul here in Romans 7:7, mentioning it and driving it home. But sin, taking opportunity through the commandment, produced in me coveting of every kind. For apart from the law, sin is dead. Now, even the Apostle Paul, the great apostle, the great man of God, the greatest man in the New Testament after Jesus, even him, produced in me coveting of every kind. You think about what Paul went through and what some of the saints of God in these persecuted countries, not just in Muslim countries, the religion of peace, but coming soon in the West, where in Canada and some of these other countries where pastors can't preach from Romans 1, and people here now have been told that they have to pay for contraceptives and pre-abortion pills. Paul, sometimes people like that will, being human and understandably, wondering, why is this happening to me? Paul had nothing. Paul was a tent maker. And he, even him says, produced in me coveting of every kind. You think he didn't want to be like some of these American pastors with their comfortable homes, $1 million homes and vacations in Florida and boats and all kind of thing? Instead, he was beaten, spit upon, left for dead, thrown off rocks, all kinds of stuff, put in jail, died in jail, and beheaded. And he's with God right now. He says, better to die is gain, and to be with Christ. Oh, I am crucified with Christ, not I, but Christ who lives within me. So, coveting. God gave us the recipe to avoid this kind of thing. And I'd like to close on our last few minutes, not just focusing on the negative about this commandment here, but showing us what God has given us. As we think about our intents and our motives and try to turn our kids away from being indoctrinated into the modern American system of class warfare, where if one person has a pen more than you or a better car than you, that it's supposed to be yours and they stole it from you. We need to turn our kids and our blocks and our homes and the community and our churches away from thinking like that to thinking more like God, like he said in Psalm 62. Because in the end, judgment is going to come down on those who do that kind of thing. Psalm 62, let's see what the Lord says. This is how we should look. In the face of all this evil, all this indoctrination, and all this, the education system teaching covetousness as curriculum, teaching campaigns, class warfare, it's horrible out there. God says in Psalm 62, number 1, we should be like David. My soul waits in silence for God only, for from him is my salvation. In fact, you want people to covet you and your salvation. You want them to want what you have. That's what you should want. My soul waits in silence for God only, from him is my salvation. He only is my rock and my salvation. My stronghold, I shall not be greatly shaken. That implies that, Even while we're waiting for the Lord and while we have the peace of the Lord and the joy, the hope, and the understanding, and people, we hope people want to see that and want it in their hearts as well, we still be shaken once in a while. Verse 3, how long will you assail a man that you may murder him, all of you, like a leaning wall, like a tottering fence? And then you go down to verse 5, because verses 3 and 4 about persecution that we talked about. My soul waits in silence for God only. My hope is from him. He is my rock and my only salvation. My stronghold, I will not be shaken, because this was a song. Verse 7 says, on God my salvation and my glory rest, the rock of my strength. My refuge is in God. Trust in him all times, O people. Pour your heart out before him. God is your refuge. Once God has spoken. Twice I have heard this in verse 11. That power belongs to the Lord, and loving kindness is yours, O Lord, for you recompense a man according to his work. And the same David said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's the attitude you should have to avoid breaking this commandment about coveting, the 10th commandment of all 10 commandments. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, because he gives good things to his people. Read Psalm 37, he gives good people good things. Thank you for joining me. See you next time on Plumb Line. May God bless you.